Okay, I'll call the meeting to order, and we can start with attendance.
Chair Eagleson Cheslowich,
Present?
Vice Chair Roman,
Present.
Board Member Pease,
Present.
Board Member Ulinskis, Board Member Willis.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Are there any agenda changes suggested?
No changes planned for today.
Okay. Do we have any public comment on items not on the agenda?
No, I have no requests.
Okay. So then should we go into the schedule? Is that, yeah, okay, schedule.
City official reports, yeah,
Yeah.
we can go into that. Let me share my screen here. All right, so we are in the month of April. So on the screen, we have the 2025 meeting schedule. We do have the meeting in the following month in May canceled. That will be because I'll be at the preservation conference and I'll provide some more updates in some future slides. Some previous subcommittee assignments that we assigned in February for those work plan goal owners. And those are detailed on the screen. And just a little bit of a follow-up, we will be holding chair and vice chair elections at that June meeting due to the May cancellation. The meeting, as mentioned, will be canceled due to the 2025 California Preservation Conference that's held in Sacramento. I have the pleasure to be a speaker, so you guys can tune in on Thursday of the conference. We'll be speaking on a panel for navigating historic preservation approvals. So more details will be coming and I can share those with you all. I did also want to provide an update on a project that came before the HRB. So that's at 1023 Forest Ave. So they are in their building permit submittal. So we've resolved the planning permit. And I received some photos that I thought would be of interest of the board today. So sharing those here. If you recall the historic Belvedere, that tower element, the restoration of that, and excuse me, the frieze up on the top portion of the Belvedere is being recreated in a workshop. So just wanted to provide that. I received these images from the architect. So it's a substantial size. It's almost over 2 feet in length and has, this will be, per the architect, the clay mold, and then it will then be a negative produced, and the ultimate a plaster cast of fiberglass will be created of that, that frieze material. So with that, I can entertain any further questions.
I think sounds like we're all set. We can continue on to our first item.
All right.
All right.
Let me share my screen again. It was a little preemptive on not sharing. Okay. Let's see here. So Historic Review Board Awards. So this is our fourth, or should I say third, discussion on this item. We've continued this from the March 13th meeting. So some of the items that we'll be discussing today will be the timing and frequency of the awards, the evaluation criteria and process, as well as potentially amending those bylaws. So there was a consensus through the previous meetings and discussions that we've had on this item for a 5-year cycle, as well as having the 2025 awards held in May during the National Preservation Month in 2026. As for some evaluation criteria, there was direction from the last meeting to expand the list, if you will, to include building permits for all inventory properties, as well as staff level historic resources board review rather than just the projects that came to the full board review. So that expanded attachment A from roughly 50 or so projects to 440. So a substantial amount in the past 10 years. And just a little note on the coloring in that. The addresses that appear multiple times are highlighted in blue, as well as the like-for-like work. So that could include, say, a replacement of windows or a roof or some of those other developments on those historic properties. And the staff report does detail, or should I say frame, a little bit of a valuation criteria here for the Secretary of Interior Standards. So just detailing those 4 treatments, which are preservation, rehabilitation, restoration, and reconstruction. So a majority of the work that the board sees is rehabilitation, and the regular maintenance, typically would fall under preservation. It's rare that we would see a reconstruction permit, and restoration is also rare, but as we had an update this morning, that Forest Avenue property was a restoration project. So it is rare, but it does occur. And detailing the bylaws, so this would be attachment B. I provided some revised language from the previous staff report that was presented to you all, and this keeps that flexibility in some of the language and allows, say, the determining award or awarding body, if you will, in the future to determine which projects would be recognized, as well as some language in section 8, which details the Secretary of Interior standards. So it kind of, provides a framework that the board can expand upon. And as for some next steps in trying to frame this discussion, we can, since this is an action item, choose to amend the bylaws today. We can also review the project list. So I do understand this is a substantial amount of projects, 440. We can, depending on the discussion today, divide the list either between board members, or maybe the board chooses to remove certain projects or dwindle that list down, such as maybe removing interior work or items that might not necessarily affect the integrity of a structure. And potentially we could consider some defining award categories. So in a review of other jurisdictions and award programs, there was some reoccurring themes, if you will, for either stewardship or adaptive reuse, perhaps small projects, restoration or rehabilitation, as well as some other jurisdictions do choose to award individuals who are, active in preservation in their communities. So it may be helpful to further explore those items that are detailed in the staff report. And with that, we can open it up to discussion and public comment, but I did want to say for the sake of this meeting, I'm happy to pull up that Excel file that was the attachment A, and we can kind of sift through that. That is a similar process that we have taken with the Architecture Review Board. So just for a little context, with their award program, that took 5 meetings, and that was with a project list. So it was around 100 projects or so, and they were deciding and, dwindling down projects depending on either if they were constructed or built, various stages, and determining from those the shorter lists, if you will, which projects they chose to award. So it seemed to be helpful based on those meetings to have the list provided on the screen, and then just sifting through those items. And then once we get to a more manageable list, we can provide some photos of those subject properties. So.
Okay. Let's go to any public comment on this item, and then I do have one quick follow-up question, but let's take public comment first if there is any.
I have no request to speak.
Okay, thank you. So my question was just about the list, since this goes through 2025, and ordinarily like our 5-year cycle would be on like the 0 and 5 years, I guess. So given that we're awarding in 2026, I just want to make sure like the list is closed as of now, and we wouldn't add that additional year. Anything done in that additional year would just go to the next cycle, right? So this is the list we've got.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, this can be a, a static list, and that is a similar process to how we manage the Architectural Review Board awards.
Okay.
Any projects that fall either say in that gap year or the year that it's being awarded, those are sent over to the following award eligible list, if you will.
Okay, great. Thank you. There, yeah.
So Samantha and I have talked about this. And okay, no pretense that we've gone over all 400 of those properties, but I think we both feel that this is really premature, that we need to first understand our intent with this awards program, that most of the projects that the HRB reviews are commercial. And I think what we feel is that we would really like to encourage residential preservation. And I don't believe these awards in their current configuration are going to do that. So I think we both feel there's a lot more to be done before we can put a substantial or logical awards program in place. And at least on my part, I don't feel like that should be our priority. I feel like these need to go on the back burner, and we need to focus on getting some incentives for preservation and updating our inventory, which, we've done the work. We just need to get it in a translatable form, I think, some way that people can look at it and really understand it. And the way it exists online right now is very convoluted, that it requires some, it's not the easiest. So from my point of view, I think we need to put this back and we need to focus on our other projects. And then I believe in that process, we will come up with a more logical pool of candidates. Certainly people that take advantage of our incentives, we would hope would all be award-winning projects. And I guess as far as things in the future that might make this program more fluid, more easy for the board to take on, is that this list of 400, if instead, when projects were, affecting historic properties, if we just had an informational summary at the end of each, packet, at the end of each meeting, what was under construction, what had come in, just so we were aware, partly for morale, that I think it would be better for the board if we saw things that were being restored, not necessarily see them and review them and talk about them in a public meeting, but be aware that people are out in our community doing rehabs and restorations that don't come to the board, but are certainly what we would like to encourage.
So Caroline and I have had multiple conversations about the awards program, and we keep coming back to other pieces of the HRB's purview. Just at the simplest, most basic level, we need a reasonable pool of candidates for awards in Palo Alto, and we are not ready. We don't feel like we have the information. We don't feel like the information we have is complete necessarily or correct. And then there's also the question of defining our award criteria and how both PAST and the HRB look at their pool of criteria right now is that they look at projects, or they look at project or homes on the inventory, or commercial as well. But we're trying to focus on homeowners. So homes on the inventory that have active projects. And I feel it's a fine starting point, but it doesn't award stewardship. It is awarding those who are making expansions to their historic home or like for like replacements, which is great for stewardship. But there are also properties not on the inventory that people have been wonderful stewards for years of. There are properties that are on the inventory that we have not seen because there's no projects or permits. Again, that would be a great example of stewardship. And then there are the properties on the inventory with projects, which are the ones that we see. So we are interested in expanding our pool, and to do that, we want to understand why some projects are not coming to the HRB. And like I said, expand that pool and have a greater understanding. We don't feel like what we have is worthy of awarding right now, or the best examples of preservation.
So that kind of brings me to one of the questions we had for Stephen. So I know that what we review is limited. And I know part of that is staff time, part of that is our time, part of that's money. So I'm really curious how that plays into the decision about what we review and what we don't review. Can you kind of give us a little insight? I mean, is it financial or is?
Yeah, so I guess a few things here. So the Historic Resources Board falls under the purview of the Historic Preservation Ordinance that captured in 1649. So in the ordinance, it details 3 review bodies. So the Architectural Review Board, which captures commercial or multi-family projects, and often that level of review is deferred to the Historic Resources Board. The Historic Resources Board, of course, which captures projects on categories 1 and 2s on the inventory, as well as structures within the historic districts. And then there's the 3rd category, which is staff level of review. And that is for minor alterations of projects that would not affect, say, the integrity of a structure, or capturing, say, like for like permits, a re-roof or items of that nature. So smaller in scope, that are captured generally with building permits. So there's no planning entitlement involved or any other, review process. So that is, the framework of what comes before the board. So as we've seen, with this list, a majority of those projects are captured at the building permit level. And this was just pulled for the inventory properties. So addressing the comment of some of these properties that may be old in the community and have been either preserved to a degree that would be worth considering. If a property is not listed on the inventory, I mean, it's really not falling under the purview of the Historic Resources Board. And just a little bit of framing, if you will, for the award program. The intent here came from the Comprehensive Plan Policy L.76, and I can read that into the record here just for a little framework for our conversation, and that's to promote award programs and other forms of public recognition for exemplary historic preservation projects. So that is similar to how the Architectural Review Board aligns with their Comprehensive Plan Policy that was framed their design awards that was created in 2005. So if that begins to answer your question, I'm happy to have any follow-up.
I think it was perfect. I think that when you say that, the award should, for preservation, and we're not seeing the best preservation projects because those are the ones that aren't really messing with the historic buildings. I think that is the root of our conflict.
Well, I think those are the ones that are covered by permits though. So they are at least appearing on the list. They're there. They're not coming to the board for approval, but they're captured on this list.
So we have identified at least one project that we would like to look into as a test case, because it's not on the initial list we received, and it's not on this list. I thought we said it wasn't on this list. So it's a category 2 in Professorville, but it hasn't come to the HRB. And it's 475 Melville.
I would have to recuse myself.
Okay.
It is on the list. Yeah.
It is on the list. Okay. Okay. Those are one example.
Do I need to exit the room?
No. We're done talking about that. But I guess you're right. A few places, I mean, I guess, a few places on this list are great restoration projects but I would say that the last 10 years has not been kind to us. I think that even though there are probably projects in Palo Alto that would be great to give awards to, I think that the first time when we start this program, we should have a strong program. It's our best chance to, really get some traction with it. And I think it's premature that, I guess partly because I think it's going to be a distraction from other things that we really should be, I feel that we really should be working on. Because I feel like we're losing things at this point because we don't have strong incentives. And then by incentives, I don't mean documenting things before they come down. Thank you very much. I mean real incentives for preservation. And I think our inventory is embarrassing. We need to have it in a Palo Alto form. It should be the best, most accessible inventory in the US. It should not be clumps of properties lumped together in some big file that are stuck on the internet. We need to really work at it. And so I think where Samantha and I both landed is yes, there are some projects that people have done great jobs with, but they are not a lot. And at this point, I think we have other priorities, and going through this list of 400 and kind of hashing this out is not a little project. So I think we both feel strongly that it's time to focus on other things. And, if this one does not exist in the next 5 years, I think that's perfectly fine. But if we don't update our inventory and we don't get some incentives, it's going to reflect in the next 100 years. We're going to lose more things. We have new people moving in all the time and a totally different price point than we've ever had in our history. And we need to make it clear and we need to help people understand there's things in Palo Alto that are really worth preserving. And I think that's our focus. And having an awards program, if it would help that, I think it would be great, but I don't believe that's what's going to help our preservation efforts.
I mean, I think where the awards program can really play a role here is in helping to reinforce, enthusiasm, interest, kind of like the hearts and minds part of this. Because I think one thing we saw with the inventory update was, that there were a lot of concerns. There wasn't a whole lot of kind of pre-existing enthusiasm. And really changing the perception of that, I think, is a very long-term project. And so I think this is something we can do, relatively soon that shows people that preservation can look great. Like it can be cool, that we as a city value it. The projects would be out in the lobby there for people who are coming in, for their permitting, they'd be able to see that. So I think it makes a nice statement. It acknowledges people who have taken good care of their properties, So I think it does help from that public perception, public engagement part of what is like a much longer, broader process of reinforcing historic preservation in Palo Alto that does include things like inventory. It involves, the municipal code. It involves all of these pieces. But, this is a way of bringing the community into the discussion and showing them, like letting people participate and see, how preservation enhances the community. The other thing I wanted to mention is I do really like the idea of the stewardship award. I think that's like a fantastic addition to the potential categories we have for the awards. It is a little harder to find. It's like we sort of have to be aware of those properties. We have to know somebody's story. We have to have seen something because they are not going to appear on a list sort of by, definition. Maybe they show up in the in-kind somewhere if the person's doing roof work or whatever. But like, they're a little harder to find, but I do think it's really valuable because there are people who are excellent long-term stewards of their projects. I also think the categories, for me at least, are sufficiently flexible to allow for a distinction between like residential and commercial. Restoration could be applied to a residential or a commercial property, like, at our discretion. So, depending upon the mix of what's available, I think, the board would be able to balance those interests pretty adequately. I think, yeah, I mean, just, I don't know. I felt like fairly comfortable with this. I also think there are a couple of projects on this list that I would be really interested in acknowledging. I mean, as we saw earlier, there is like a pretty incredible restoration occurring right now. There are things like that where I wouldn't want to miss it. And so, they're on this list now. They would be in this cycle. We don't have to like award super broadly, but for these real gems, it seems like a missed opportunity.
That goes back to the criteria of we need to decide and draw a line if projects need to be completed or not, because 1023 Forest is not complete. So I don't know that we should be awarding it when it's not complete. And I also want to go back to 475 Melville. You may need to recuse yourself. The permit was applied for on August 2nd, 2022. It's a category 2 in Professorville. So in theory, it should have come to the HRB because there is facade restoration listed.
About to go.
So we do have a member that, I mean, are we wanting to discuss this in further detail? I mean,
Yeah, because
okay.
I don't because if it was before my time, that's fine. But Caroline also didn't remember seeing this project come to us.
Right. Well, just a few quick notes here. So I do believe that if this is going to be substantive, we probably should have the board member recuse themselves. That,
Should I step out?
yes, that probably would be advisable. All right. Okay.
And I will say the reason this came up is I was walking, as I do, in Professorville about a week ago before Caroline and I met last. And I was making and this is in support of the stewardship idea. These projects are hard to find unless you're out in the community looking around at what's taking place around you, because somebody may be doing facade restoration, or maybe not facade restoration. Well, if it's not on the inventory, yeah, they may be doing facade restoration. And so there were 3 or 4 properties that I sent addresses to Caroline. One of which was 475 Melville, which I did not know at the time that was Alyssa's house. But it was obvious that they're doing a facade restoration and a lot of work there. And there are several other projects that are also examples of great work being done. But this was one specifically that when we dug into it, it says on the list, the permit was submitted in late 2022. And if it was seen, before my time, then then great, the system is working. But this is one that I don't remember seeing.
So this was also before my time as well. So with that permit being opened on 8/2/2022, 2 of 2022, and the issuance of the building permit also before my time in 9/5 of 2023. So I believe that's the permit issued that you're referring to on that. And then there was also a previous permit, if you will, that was issued in 2019. So for that 2019 permit, it appears based on the description that that was reserved for interior work.
Correct.
As for the remodel for exterior improvements for either, let's see here, a re-roof, a facade, a garden deck, reconfiguration and removal of a carport, trellis and garage, I'll have to look further into that just to see what that determination was. But in some instances, when there's work that's conducted on a property, perhaps on a structure that might not be listed on the inventory, so the address itself is listed 475 Melville, but perhaps there is an accessory structure that was completed after the fact.
No, there's been work on the facade. And I think actually some of the porch columns were reconfigured due to the, back to the historic. But yeah, significant work.
Okay.
There was at least one window is my recollection.
Okay.
So, things that could, they're definitely restoration rather than, redoing. But still, I think there's a line where we at least need to be aware of these things, even if there's no reason for us to pass judgment on them or advise on them, I guess would be. So in that particular case, I would have thought it would come to the HRB. I know nobody listens to our meetings, but it would be nice to have some positive more positive things. And I think a lot of the reason that we're having trouble with awards is because we do see the drastic ones. And it's hard to award things that are going too far.
If I may, on that note here, so I definitely think that we've prefaced this by I'll have to look into this further just to see those specific details. And by no means is this a excuse for any of the previous work done by either other planners in our office. But I do want to highlight here that this is a relatively newer position. So the community had been without a historic preservation planner for upwards of 7 years. So that it also takes up a majority of that 10-year cycle list. So I think, we're at a great opportunity here to implement some of these new programs in the community and, encourage preservation and award exemplary projects. And this also offers an opportunity to educate the community about what preservation looks like and what would be, preferred or what would be a good project. So I think, if we want to focus on kind of moving forward, I think we're at a great opportunity to review this list and maybe identify some opportunities that we may have missed upon in the past that potentially this project maybe should have come before the board. So we can identify those items and have a better awareness moving forward.
Well, Samantha and I will send you a couple more properties too. The Marx house and one of the Marx Brothers, not the movie Marx Brothers, but Iron Marx Brothers, house on Waverly has had a lot of work done on it recently. It looks beautiful, but I think that would be nice to include in our, what was the process on that? It could have come to the board before my time, but I don't know.
So I'm actually really glad to have this list because I'm not that familiar with a lot of these properties and I will be looking through this. For me, it seems that it might be beneficial if we're going to do this awards program to really recognize some additions rather than just pure restorations. Because as you mentioned, the economics of it, more and more people are buying these properties to do expansions. And if we recognize the ones that do it well, those are the people we need to reach out to. I totally understand what you're saying about the people who are great stewards and do nothing to their properties. But, those are the people that do that of their own. And the people that we really need to reach out to and try and sway are the ones who are buying these properties to do expansions and developments.
Yeah, I didn't mean to imply that every addition is, a mistake, but I do think that, I don't know. I mean, I can't remember these properties, whether there have been additions in some of these things that were just not what primarily caught my eye,
Okay, well,
but I do think you're right, that we need
this
to
is
award that.
the thing that I'm really interested in looking at, because I think that's, more and more what's going to be happening.
Yeah, I know.
If I may, I'll look towards the vice chair or acting chair. So we do have the chair out of the room now. Are we done with the discussion of their property?
Yes.
Okay, so I believe we may want to welcome them back. So I'm unsure exactly where they went. So perhaps a quick meeting recess. But
Oh,
Okay.
do I need to call a recess?
yes, please. Perhaps we return at 9:10 because it's 9:06 right now.
Perfect. Let's recess till 9:10.
All right. We back? Okay. All right, back from the recess. I guess let's continue with any discussion of the awards program. Not totally sure where we left off, but if there's additional comment or, remarks from staff.
So I think one of the benefits of this board is that we have differing views on what in historic preservation merits award. I am a big supporter of adaptive reuse, for instance. Caroline, with an architecture background, is what I would call a purist and wants to keep things intact as they were built. And Geddes was just saying that he would like to award or sees merit in awarding expansion projects on historic houses. So we have a variety of interests in historic preservation, all individually that have merit and reason. From the stance that Caroline and I have as the subcommittee for the awards, we're not feeling particularly compelled by what we have seen, is kind of what I will summarize, which is why we're talking about stewardship and going beyond. So in the interest of expanding the pool without having to look at other projects or go searching the community for stewardship projects, I think it would be valuable to have each board member come back with 2 or 3 properties that they would like to award or that they see merit in awarding, and present them and tell us why. And I think that will give us a more well-rounded pool of projects to look at, and will also help us define our categories. Should there be a category for adaptive reuse? Should there be a category for stewardship? Should there be a category for expansion? Should there be a category for restoration? So I want to propose that and see what the other members think.
I think there may be an opportunity for people to take, some of these existing categories and, like kind of we did with the goals, for somebody to be kind of the point person for looking at properties associated with that and kind of evaluating feasibility. It sounds like we already have some folks who are interested in particular ones. But then they could look at the appropriate part of the list and, kind of like report back with their thoughts about like that particular goal.
I think that's a great idea.
I feel strongly there's things we need to be doing, like working on our ordinance and working on our inventory. And I think this is a sidetrack that's going to take a lot of time. And I think we need to redirect personally.
If I may, so the action item before you is regarding the preservation awards. There is a work plan, goal and project regarding and addressing your items, Board Member Willis. For the sake of today's discussion, reserving that, for the preservation awards and fleshing out what that future program would look like would be, appropriate. And we can schedule at a future meeting further discussion on those other items, should there be substantive comments.
I mean, if we each kind of take a proposed category with the cancellation next month, we can come back in July, having, had, a good chunk of time to look at the list, drive around, whatever we need to do.
And on that, so there's roughly 440 projects, so that would equate to around 88 projects per board member. So I guess some next steps here, what I'm hearing from the board, this also would track with the process that we conducted with the Architectural Review Board. So following the meeting, staff can, divide up the list either by area or by number of the categories. So make it an ease for each of the board members and select those 88 projects for each board member and send that out through some correspondence. So
Before we make assignments for close to 100 list, I'd like to go back to some of the context here. Actually, context is really important. I really think stewardship in small projects are very interesting. When you brought up small projects before, I said, well, how would we identify them? I've long been concerned about the opacity of the projects that the planning department does independently. We've never been able, even though we've asked, at least I have asked several times, how many is that a month typically? Is there a list? I've never gotten an answer from staff about that. If you wanted to find small projects or additions that might be exemplary, that's where you're going to get them. So I think we need to have some idea of the projects that staff, under the rules, is allowed to just agree to or turn down, in order to see where we might find a small project that would sail through the planning process, but fits that category quite nicely. We're very constrained about what we can do, but I don't understand why we're constrained about what we're allowed to know. And that seems to be, that's a major problem for me on this board. And it has been a major problem for me on this board since I joined it. And I just don't understand it, because these are really great ideas. The idea of a addition that really is in harmony with the building is like virtual preservation. It's trying to deal with a reality on the ground. It's not because it's a preference. It's not because that's what I want. It's because it's trying to deal with a reality, a market reality, and a reality on the ground. And I don't see why we should see things disappear for that reason entirely. So I'm not a purist. I'm trying to be be practical. But those are really great ideas. And if somebody has got a category 1 or 2 house or a listed house, and they're doing things to it that don't require coming to us, those may be the very projects that we want to highlight and reward. Well, I don't think they're on this list.
If I may.
Are they all on this list?
So just a little background of how this list was compiled. So
Okay.
following that previous meeting, what was originally presented to the Historic Resources Board was just projects that came before the board.
Okay.
So this expanded list of the 440 also includes those projects, but it also includes the projects for every designated property in the city, so category 1 through 4, as well as properties within the historic districts. So with the help of our data team, we were able to sift through and pull through our Acela permitting software, all of these projects that are before you. So
I
that
appreciate that, and I stand corrected perhaps, but I went through the early process of looking into this inventory and spent days driving around Palo Alto with an iPhone taking pictures of things. And I don't want to go through that process again, because I don't think I can tell very much from sitting on the sidewalk off of somebody's property and inspecting it to see what's there. I can't see what's behind it. In many cases, I couldn't see it because of landscaping. I don't want to invest that time in that way. So the idea of 88 homes, whether I live in Calistoga or not, is really not a very good use of time. That's what I think.
I mean, I think some of these can perhaps be, removed just sort of out of hand, things like I see some alterations to like commercial kitchens, or,
Right.
Installation of signage. So I don't think we're looking really at the full 440.
correct. And staff can remove with the direction of the board some of those projects that either are highlighted in blue for either like for like, or if we want to keep those in, but some of the interior work perhaps that wouldn't be affecting the integrity of the structure. So I think for best next steps here, direction on how to, dwindle that list down. I think, an excellent suggestion here of that commercial kitchen.
Well, that's
would be one.
still, I'm sorry, that's still not answering my point. If we are constrained by the ordinances and the way that all the city's structured, that's fine. But if you want to have a campaign to raise awareness over time, a long-term project, We need to be able to look at ways to fit in that and to reinforce it. And the way we're organized now, we just can't do that, as far as I can tell. The overwhelming majority of them are commercial. There's very few that are residential. I see nothing on the horizon, including the Mills Act, that's going to change anybody's mind in this town after they spend the kind of money they spend to buy a house here. It's just absurd to me. It works for other people in other places, but not here. So we need something a little bit more shaped to the economic realities of residential real estate in Palo Alto if we want to preserve things one way or another. Something is better than nothing. That's what I think. Otherwise, we just lose the places, or we just don't know about them, or the people who actually do the right thing
So,
are not recognized.
Christian, I think that goes back to the incentives that we started working on. And I think we have to do a better job and really sort of drill down and really develop those ideas very strongly. So why don't we use between now and July to really revisit this incentives, because I think what we're learning in this discussion is it's really important. Thank you.
And further on that note, if it's the will of the board, we can, schedule that for the June meeting to have a more substantive conversation about those preservation incentives. And I just want to note briefly on this, but before we get back to the awards, back in 2023, there was a community outreach meeting held for incentives and talking with community members about what would be preferred or, in their interest to investigate. So we can have some of those conversations further offline about how, as we frame that discussion item at a following meeting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with agendizing a discussion of incentives on in June. That it does keep coming up. I think the question of what we want to do with the awards program is what we need to address today. It is on our work plan. This is something we are supposed to be looking at and making some sort of decision about this year. So I think, the question is whether we decide we want to keep, trying to, tinker with this and pursue it. I don't know if we can, decline to move forward on something on the work plan. But I mean, I would still, in my view, it is still worth having having as something we do. We don't have to go out and award two folks in every single category. We can be very tailored about this, particularly, in the early stages, or if we feel like we have concerns about, our bandwidth. I think there are just ways of doing this that don't really require a comprehensive overhaul of everything to acknowledge a few properties that are really doing an outstanding job of historic preservation. They're out there.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't want to see this thing delayed now that we said we would do it indefinitely. And I'm afraid that's exactly what will happen. So that makes sense. But I still think more information here about what alternatives there are in that regard as you discuss it makes sense. And that keeps the ball rolling.
In the interest of having more information, we keep coming back to, we need more information. And then we're talking about, well, staff can cut down this list so it's easier to digest. This is not a hard list to digest. I'm looking right now at the description: residential 3-bathroom and closet remodel. No. Detached carport. No. Let's see, basement addition, remodel house, addition to first floor, covered porch. Okay, maybe we look at that one. This is not you don't have to go around and see them, with all due respect, to make a judgment based on the description. Demo existing garage. Okay,
Yeah.
that's probably not great.
I see a lot of tenant improvements here.
Yeah.
And those we probably don't have to worry about.
And I'm not saying that we actually even need to split up the list. We don't need to assign 88 per board member, I think that's actually probably not in our interest, because the 88 I may see would be residential additions, and I'm gonna be like, nope, don't love that. Not gonna award any of those. Where Geddes would be like, that's great. So I think it's our responsibility to look through the whole list. I'm sorry. Like,
I
this
agree.
is, Caroline and I have been doing a massive amount of work. I would also, sorry, I'm fired up today, you guys. Like, don't get me going. Like, we've been doing a massive amount of work on this project, and we're ready to see the rest of the board come to the table. And I'm trying to assign that. And we're ready to see the rest of the board come to the table with some other examples on what they've been working on in their subcommittees. Like, we have been on this board for too long where nothing happens.
I think that's a really great idea, but it's a lot different than what was being proposed as I heard it. So,
So I have a few thoughts. One, look at these properties, yes, but I think also we should all write down what we understand the intent of initiating this awards program to be. And not just say promoting preservation in Palo Alto. No, you have to go a little further. What's our intent? And then this is going to be a little more, but define the criterion. You know, what do you feel is going to be important for these projects? And then on sort of a different track, I feel like we have what we learned when we went through the proposed additions to the inventory is that our 1, 2, 3, 4 is slightly out of date. And there is certainly a lot of 3s and 4s in our inventory that are actually stronger 2s than a lot of the 2s that we added to the inventory. And I feel like if we're going to do this awards program and it's going to apply to category 1s and 2s, we need to look at those 3s and 4s and reevaluate. And I don't think this means hiring a consultant. I think that 90% of them we can come to an agreement on and have enough information. All these have some research in our inventory. So it's not like we're operating from ground zero, but I think we really need to look at those 3s and 4s and get our inventory up to date. So everything is on a level ground. So we're not saying, you know, well, you're a category 2 and you're, you know, can have these incentives and you can, you know, come to the board when you want to do something, but you know, nope, you're a 3, so, you know, whatever. You might think you're a 2, so you got to come to us and become a 2, but we're not going to like just make you a 2. But I think it's our job to reevaluate our inventory and make sure it is an honest inventory, you know, and I think right now it's from the 80s and it's out of date and we need to face up to that. I know that might be a slightly different, but for me, it plays into everything because we're treating 1s and 2s differently than we're treating 3s and 4s. And then I guess the last thing is I would hate to see us rush into this awards program because I do feel like it's a good opportunity. But I think we need to understand what our intent is with it. And for me, it's not giving commercial properties one more pat on the back or one more incentive. To me, it's about promoting preservation in our community to all our community members.
Okay, well, in an effort to keep the conversation going, let's see here. So there is 12 months between now and the 2026 preservation month in May of 2026. So that's a year of time. I think it's pretty reasonable or manageable, if you will, that the board can, you know, kind of get through and work through this program and have something of substance to deliver in May. On that note, next steps, from what I'm hearing, there has been provided some draft language for the amendment to the bylaws today. That is in attachment B. That language is flexible. There could be a decision made on attachment B to move that forward, effectively amending the bylaws. solidifying, say, this program and the work that we're doing in the procedural rules for the Historic Resources Board. And what I'm hearing is another discussion, probably plural discussions, would be in play to work out and flesh out what this program would look like in the future. Some of those projects, I've heard varying things of either dividing the list or having everyone look at the list in its entirety. So providing staff some direction on what that would look like and direction to the board members, I think, would be warranted. And following through with the final item, which would be some of those award categories and paired with the intent. So what is the intent of the program? We've provided the comprehensive plan policy. That's the guiding principle, if you will, for this program. And further expanding upon that to see what the board would like to see this look like in Palo Alto. I think having some of that context would be great. And on that note, having some of those award categories and how those can, play towards that intent. So.
Yeah, I mean, looking at this draft language, it's silent on the subject of the categories. Like, it gives us a lot of flexibility to determine, how we want to shape this. I see this, the bylaws as sort of that we are going to create a program language. And that's sort of where it stops. And I actually think that that's fine under the circumstances because, it creates the program. It says we, are intending and committing to doing this. But then, how we frame those individual categories, how, we frame how those properties are identified, examined by us, that kind of thing. We still have a lot of flexibility there. This just it makes the program exist.
That's correct.
So my thoughts on that is that, so it's the first section, 8.0, I think we should eliminate the every 5 years beginning in 2025 until we more fully understand where we're heading with this. Point 1 and point 2 don't really say much, so whatever. I don't feel strongly about them one way or the other, but I don't think they also have any real teeth,
8.2 is just how we would provide that acknowledgement, it's been pretty consistent, like what we would like to have award recipients get, it's a proclamation from council and display space out front.
And if I may, so this language in this article closely aligns with the Architectural Review Board's article about their design award program. And if we're keeping kind of some of the teeth, if you will, of this, it would be establishing, say, the frequency of the awards and potentially the award start date, as well as, outlining, which it is flexible here, what that awarding criteria and number of awards would look like, as well as what those awards, how they would be presented. So those 3 items are, captured in those sections in the language provided. So just a little context there.
I like all the maze.
Does it have to have 2025 in it?
That can be stricken. So
maybe presented every 5 years, because my understanding is we liked the 5-year cycle. There was kind of general consensus that seemed appropriate and enough time to get enough kind of properties on the list.
Truth, I don't think we really understand where we're headed with this. So I don't know, 5 years, 3 years, I don't know. I don't think we have enough information to really make an educated decision on that. But, if you want to put it in there, I don't really object, but I just don't think we're operating from any knowledge on this one.
Well, and this also can, be a start, right? So having this language will be, solidifying that in the procedural rules for the Historic Resources Board, as well as, any future amendments can be made to these sections. So should, something be, figured out through the process of the first award program, we can revisit this. So
we can amend the frequency
right.
as a board if we
Oh.
find that the frequency we adopt is not helpful or inappropriate for some reason.
This is a proposal, right? I mean, we don't decide this. We don't amend it. How does that work?
Yeah, these are our bylaws. We amend them for ourselves.
They don't have to
Yeah.
go under any review? Okay.
Any other comments on this?
No.
Okay. Then I guess I will move to adopt the suggested language for Article 8, the preservation awards, striking the language at the beginning of Section 8.0, beginning in 2025.
I second.
Yes. And this one we should probably vote individually.
Yeah, or if you want voice vote, you can, since all are present in the chamber.
Okay. All are present in the chamber to voice vote. All in favor?
I,
Hi.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, the vote's unanimous.
And just for the record, so I first heard nay, then I heard aye, so just,
I didn't say nay, I said,
so for the record, it was a unanimous
It
vote.
was a unanimous vote
Okay.
for the record, yes.
Thank you.
Okay. I think the second part of this is if, there is interest on the part of board members to take individual categories and just take a pass through the list about, properties that might fit that bill.
I am happy. I took down some notes on suggested next steps. And I am happy to, I know so here's the thing. Brown Act is not meant to prevent work from getting done. It's meant to protect the public so that they can see everything that's getting done. So I would actually prefer, rather than routing it through staff, to actually directly email the board the next steps and have those on record.
Staff can provide direction to the board, but
I feel like, yes, with all due respect, yes. I don't see the work that's being done after the fact when we put it through city planners rather than just individually emailing the board.
so the process that you're describing would be classified, say, like as a daisy chain. So that can create either a serial meeting, say perhaps, vice chair messages, board member piece that messages Willis, and then through those conversations, it can create a substantive conversation. So having that would be a violation of the Brown Act and would need to be a scheduled meeting. So I think, following the same process that we did with the Architectural Review Board of having, staff send out the project list, if you will, or the directions to the board, and having any of those correspondence filtered back, is a preferred method of communication. And I definitely welcome any board members to, send any suggestions to staff, and we can, figure things out. I just don't think that would be having each of the board members messaging each other on an item that the board would be taking an action on would be preferred.
Yeah, it has to occur publicly. So, I mean, we could send things to you and then you could compile it and send it back out. But we can't email each other about board business in that way. Subcommittees can have like a one-on-one discussion, but we can't like email each other. Or we can't email everyone about board business.
A quorum could not be made for those conversations, but these ad hocs of 2 members are sufficient because a quorum is not had on that.
Big sigh for the record. Don't love that. Fine. Fine.
this is slightly off track, but I just think that what Samantha and I have made clear is that we would like to focus on other things that we feel are more important than this awards program. So if staff wants to lead it, that's fine. But I think as far as us being responsible for this program, I think what you're hearing is we're not the right picks, that, we've had other ideas about how it might go forward, that we're not in sync with board thinking. And I just feel like, if somebody else wants to take it on or if it's appropriate for staff just to lead it, that's fine.
So if we're going back in time, back to the February meeting of when the board, formed those subcommittees, if you will, there's no, holding to that. A subcommittee or ad hoc can be disbanded, if you will, or dissolved. So if that's, the intent of the subcommittee members, that can occur. That's what I'm hearing. Is that what we're?
Yes, I think we're offering it up to anybody else in the board who might be more focused on this particular project.
Yeah, to Caroline's point, I need to focus on my other subcommittee of updating the inventory. We've brought this back several times. And I think we've gotten it to the point that we feel we've sufficiently contributed, I think, for right now.
So as chair, can I authorize the dissolution of that subcommittee?
Or solicit somebody else.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind working on it. I don't know if there's other interest, but I think at this point, I feel like it's just sort of a going through the list and, looking at some categories and seeing if we can kind of put things into buckets that we're all happy with.
If you want assistance, I'll help you.
Okay. So can we record a new awards subcommittee?
And for the record, that would be Chair Eagleson Cheslowitz and Board Member Nolanakis.
Yep. Okay. And then, I know we're talking about incentives in June, but would it make sense to agendize this perhaps for, I don't want to overload the June meeting, but, a quick report back, or is that?
I think
Yeah.
that could happen in 2
Okay.
months.
Yeah. Everybody kind of okay with this as a way forward? Any additional comments before we're close this one out? Okay. Okay. So then I'd like to move on to the approval of the HRB meeting draft minutes from the March 13th meeting. Does anybody have comments, corrections, anything like that? Okay. So then I would like to move to approve the March 13th, 2025 HRB meeting minutes.
I'll second that.
Okay. Everyone is present in the chambers, so we can voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, it passes unanimously by voice vote. And then finally, are there any other, board business announcements? Things like that?
Oops, sorry, Caroline. Yeah, the past annual awards presentation will be on May 4th at 2 p.m. at the Art Center.
Also, PASS is organizing tours for Preservation Month, and I really encourage everybody to go. That they're actually expanding their selection. So there's lots of different choices, and I think most of them are in May, but I noticed 1 or 2 in June. So
Any other comments? Okay, then I'd like to adjourn the meeting. Thank you.